Incorrect assembly and disassembly can permanently damage your device. Even if you follow the instructions, there is a possibility that something unexpected may occur. We are not responsible for your phone. If you're not willing to accept the inherent liability, hire a professional. Do this at your own risk. Hey, this is Mike from GoCellPhoneRepair.com, and today we are going to replace the display on a Samsung Galaxy S5. Sometimes it's a little difficult to tell for sure that the display itself is damaged. If you take a look at it from just the right angle, usually you can see some cracks underneath the glass that are actually in the AMOLED. But at other times you can't really tell. What you'll notice happens is that your phone seems to be working, but you just can't see anything on the screen. When you power it up, it stays completely black. And that is usually going to be a broken AMOLED. And unfortunately, it's a little expensive to replace these, but it's still definitely worth it for this phone. So we'll start by removing the panel from the back of the phone, and of course remove your battery. If you have a SIM card or micro SD card, I would recommend you go ahead and take those out just to be safe. We're going to have one screw that we need to remove here from down just above the speaker on the back panel of the phone, and that is going to give us access to a panel that goes over the pop connector for the home button, which you will see here shortly. Now, these screws in the back of the phone and the panels can be a little bit tricky. You might have to work with them a little bit. But once you get this one out, and this is a standard Phillips screw, what you want to do is take a pry tool and just try to get underneath the edge of this plastic very carefully. You might have to work with it a little bit. Like I said, they can be somewhat stubborn. I believe what happened here is our technician just ended up grabbing it with his fingernail, and it did come out. So underneath here, and I would also recommend you stick with a soft tool. You can do this with the screwdriver, but usually want to get under here with something that cannot poke around in here too much, unless you're very experienced. And we're going to go ahead and disconnect this pop connector from the back, and you can see how that plugs in. And then we just have two more screws on the back that need to come out down here at the bottom near the charging port. And again, you'll notice that these screws tend to get stuck in the case, so you kind of have to grab a hold of them and pull in order to get them to come out. We'll just speed this up here a little bit. And once you get those two out, what we're going to go ahead and do is just thoroughly heat up the front of the phone. Now remember, this is a damaged display, so we're not really worried about causing any further damage. If you were trying to remove the screen from a working Galaxy S5 without damaging the AMOLED, it's going to take a lot more time and patience and a certain element of luck, because it is very easy to break these things. So again, this one's already broken. We're not too worried about it, so we're going to heat it up pretty thoroughly. AMOLEDs are very sensitive to heat, so if you get them too hot, if they're not already damaged, you can burn them very easily. Once we've warmed this up to make the adhesive more pliable, we'll start right here about the center, and you'll notice that we're going underneath the glass, between the glass on the front panel and the bezel that goes around the outside of the phone. And you want to work your way up and down the sides here. And then you'll notice that he's actually going across the top. If you go as deep as he is right now across the top, you will cut that flex cable at the top also. So again, doesn't really matter in this situation, but just be aware that there are cables inside the top and the bottom that we're going to have to work around. So if you just go down the side here very carefully, try not to go between the glass and the AMOLED. Try to get underneath the entire assembly if possible. That's going to make your life a lot easier, and you'll spend a lot less time removing this. If you do split the two, it's not that big of a deal, but you'll have to go back in and dig underneath the display to pull it out. So I try to get this whole thing at once if you can, and you can even go underneath the flex cables there a bit and just continue to work your way around. And just don't force it. You'll see there's a connector there that kind of popped out on its own. If it hadn't, you'd have to go in there and disconnect that, and it'll be a little bit more clear here further into the video where you can see what the display looks like when it's not attached to the phone. And you'll see he's very carefully pulling out down here, because what we're going to do is actually bring that home button cable through the mid frame. So you want to make sure you do not damage this in the process. Otherwise, you'll have to be replacing that as well. One more thing to be very aware of, very careful around, is the buttons that are stuck to the glass at the bottom of the phone adjacent to the home button. These need to be pried away from the glass very carefully. If you cut the cables, you may have some trouble with things lighting up at the bottom of the phone. So do make sure you apply some heat here, and very carefully try to take something that is thin but not sharp. He is using a pry tool here rather than a razor blade, and you want to get right underneath this tape that's actually stuck directly to the lens itself. Go ahead and just pull that down, put it back inside the frame as well as you can. And there you can see when the pry tool is not in the camera view that the cable from the home button is actually kind of sticking up. So it's already come through the mid frame. You can see it's stuck to the back of the foil there. And we'll go ahead and remove the entire display from the mid frame. And what we're going to do now is heat this up a little bit more. We do need to salvage the home button. In this particular instance, we did not have another white display, but the customer was okay with using a black display. So we're actually going to end up with a white home button and a black display. May look funny, may make it easier to find the button at night, who knows. But in any case, you do want to apply some heat here. There's going to be quite a bit of adhesive that goes around this little rubber gasket on the back of the home button. And we want to avoid tearing that, because if you do, it's not going to destroy the phone, but it does allow moisture and dust to get inside the bottom there, and we want to kind of avoid that as much as possible. Samsung has gotten a lot better here at making their phones dust resistant and water resistant, so the more you can do that, the longer your phone's going to last under adverse conditions. And you'll see he's got to really kind of work at this because it's glued in there pretty well, and just being really careful not to damage anything in the process. And be very careful with this flex cable as well. You don't want to put any tension on that, as it can tear quite easily. Surely it can be replaced, but if you don't have one on hand, it kind of sucks to have to put your repair on hold while you order a new one. So we should be able to preserve the adhesive that's already on here. If not, you can always add some later on, but for the most part, if you can use the original piece, it makes your life a lot easier. You might have to straighten it out a bit and possibly clean it if you've got dirt accumulated around the button itself. And what we're going to do here is just kind of pull this entire flex assembly up from the back of the display, because we need to remove this wax paper. This will typically expose an adhesive that's been applied to the replacement part. However, if the particular part you're working with does not have adhesive, you may have to add some to the frame. You'll see here there's actually still some sticky stuff left over where those pink kind of colored areas are, but we're actually going to add some additional adhesive. So I'm going to go ahead and let you see where he's applying all of this double-sided tape. And if you don't have any on hand, be sure to follow the link in the video description. I'm going to set up a page. Actually, I'm going to add this to an existing page of adhesives. There are several different types, and they all have specific applications. We find this really sticky stuff on the roll to do very well under this particular situation, because you need something really sticky that is a little more heavy duty than the 300, the 3M 300 LSE, which is what I usually use. So again, I will link that on the web page. Just follow the link in the video description if you need parts, adhesive, tools, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and set the home button back in place on the new display assembly. And do be very careful with the AMOLED itself on the back side. You don't want to apply any pressure to that. You don't want anything to drop on top of it. They are very sensitive when they're outside of the phone because they're protected on the outside by the glass, but they're protected on the back side by the panel, by the mid-frame panel, and you do not have that protection right now. So do be very careful. And you'll have to peel off a few pieces of tape here and there, make sure nothing gets left behind. And then we'll go ahead and proceed with putting a little more double stick adhesive on the top and the bottom areas. And these are the areas that are the most important, the parts that actually bond to the glass, because as you can see on the back of the display, you've got that foil material, and while it does somewhat adhere to the back of the display, it's not going to give you a lot of protection if the two start to separate. What's really going to hold them in place is the adhesive that goes at the top and the bottom of the mid frame. So do be sure that you add some wherever necessary, and of course always be aware that if there are any sensor windows that need to be open, you do not want to cover them up. You'll see that at the bottom he actually put the adhesive over the lights, but because this is a transparent adhesive, it should not, well, once you get the wax paper peeled off, it should not interfere with the functionality of the lights at the bottom. And you might have to trim them up a little bit with this pair of scissors so that they fit in the rounded corners here. So what we're going to do is go ahead and remove all of this wax paper so that the adhesive is exposed. Once you're ready to install the panel, this is what you're going to do. And once we've got all the adhesive wax paper peeled off, we will go ahead and install this. And one other extra step you can take, and that is heating up the double stick tape before you apply the display. If you're working in a particularly cool climate or somewhere that's got anything as far as humidity or lack thereof that causes adhesive to be less functional, if you add a little bit of heat first, it does make it stickier. So it's not going to make a huge difference, but every little bit helps. So what we're going to do is go ahead and plug the AMOLED in at the top of the mid frame here to this pop connector, and then we're going to, it may be a little difficult to see, but as you install the display, you want that flex cable from the home button to actually feed through the mid frame so that we can plug it in on the other side. So unfortunately, this was slightly out of the camera shot when he did it, but you can see here he's kind of just guiding that through so that it comes through the back side. You don't want to push down on this with that flex cable stuck behind the screen because you can easily damage it. So do make sure you feed that through. And once you do that, you can plug it in, and then we can kind of work around the edges and make sure that everything is seated properly. And we'll go ahead and replace that retaining panel and the two screws at the bottom. And we'll go ahead and throw the battery back in, place the panel on the back, and of course if you had a SIM card or a micro SD card, you want to go ahead and put those in before you put the panel on. Hit the power button. Test the touch functionality on the screen. Make sure everything's working properly, and that'll do it. If you found the video helpful, hit the like button, share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Post your questions in the comment section below or visit gocellphonerepair.com/forum. Thanks for watching.